Good evening and welcome to the Easton Audit Committee meeting of Tuesday, September 6, 2022. In keeping with the ongoing emergency order from Governor Charlie Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, and under legislation passed to address remote board meetings during the emergency declaration, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board and committee members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count toward quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded on ECAP. Okay. All right. So first item on the agenda is our fiscal year 21 audit review. And so Wendy, do you want to bring Ken in as a panelist or Ed? Okay.
Oh. There we go.
Hi, Ed.
How are we doing?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for making the time to present to us. This will be our first time in years without Len leading the charge. So,
well, I'm sure we're still in good hands here. I recognize some familiar faces here, so I'm sure it's going to be a really good conversation.
Okay. All right. So I guess yeah, ready when you are. If you want to go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me here this evening. And first off, I do want to say thank you for being flexible last week. I did have something come up, and I've been pretty fortunate over the years to not have to cancel one of these meetings. So thank you again for your flexibility in that. That was certainly helpful to myself. So thank you again. My name is Ed Boyd. I'm a principal with Melanson and the engagement partner for the town of Easton. And tonight we're going to be going over the June 30, 2021 audit. Now, Wendy, do you have the draft to potentially pull up? And maybe, Madam Chairwoman, what I'll ask you is, I'm prepared, similar to prior years, happy to go over some financial highlights, but I'm also prepared to look at some of the pages within the document. I'm certainly, here tonight at your pleasure, this committee's pleasure. So open to, really go through this in any way that you think it's going to be most effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if we just proceed the same way we have in past years. So if we want to start with, with the overall summary and then dive into some of the key exhibits. I know that painful OPEB number certainly casts a pall on the overall numbers. So we can talk about that, put that in context for anybody who views this later. And then I did have, I read through, there were a couple of points in the document where I just have some suggestions for, there were just some minor typos before we finalize. And then I had a few questions, but really nothing major. Okay. So Kelly and Mark, I don't know if you've had time to take a look at the financials and if there are any items that you want to discuss either at the top of the conversation or just as we go through it.
Definitely, as we go through it, I took a look at it, went through it as best I could, and I'll say stuff as the meeting continues.
Okay.
I prefer the same too.
Okay, great.
Perfect. And just as we go,
but I'm at a different computer tonight because for some reason my computer around like 6:30 starts slowing down and acting really strange. So I had to sit at a different computer tonight. So I don't have those to call up to share the screen, but if somebody else could do that, that would be great.
Okay, let me see if let's see. I can send it over to the computer that I'm working on unless Mark or Kelly has it handy.
I have it handy if you want.
Okay, yeah, if that would be great if you could pull it up and Ed can just let you know where we want to go.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
What I'll do too, when I reference the page number, it might be easier for me just to say the PDF page number because the report pages versus the PDF are a little bit off. So let me know if we just need to certainly connect up there. Okay. So, I think the overall theme, I think is going to be a pretty positive one. And as Jennifer kind of alluded to, I think where a lot of the discussion is going to end up is we're going to be talking about probably the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability. But, where I want to start with is really just some communications and saying that the audit went very well. We found the books and records to be in good working order. We found key accounts to be reconciled on a timely basis. There were no disagreements with management in the application of generally accepted accounting principles. We did issue a management letter with a couple of recommendations, but there were no material weaknesses or no significant deficiencies, just more some areas that can be cleaned up. But again, I think if you look at the management letter over the last couple of years, you're going to see that that load has been lightened. And I think that just kind of speaks to, the town and this group over the last, handful of years since I've been doing this, being very active in addressing some of those comments. And lastly, but certainly not least, we issued a unmodified or a clean opinion, which means your financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Anything other than an unmodified or a clean opinion is going to raise some red flags. So that's something I always want to communicate first and foremost, even before we, before we dive into the numbers. And really, maybe just for reference, if you want to scroll down, and pardon me, I just want to open up my PDF so I can give you the right page number. That's going to be on PDF page 5. Scroll back up, Kelly, I'm sorry. PDF page 5. One more, I believe. Other way.
So Kelly, I think he's referencing, as you can see in the top where it says like in that header, like page 6 out of 73, et cetera, not the page number that's printed.
I can't see the header because of the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right. I can reference the actual the report page number. My apologies. I thought the other way would be easier, but really, I just want to highlight just kind of where this resides, just because I feel like everyone wants to kind of dive into the financial statements, but the opinion is within the independent auditors report in the first 2 or 3 pages of the document. Okay. Now from here, let's give you the actual page. Let's go to page 15, please. So as you were scrolling there, you did pass over what's called the management's discussion analysis. And again, I think that's something where Jennifer might want to go back to, and we can look at some of the highlights and maybe some of the language in there that again can really kind of paint the picture. And that really is trying to do what I'm doing here this evening is talking to you folks about really some of the key points and key numbers in this document. Even though there's 70 pages. The unfortunate reality is there's only a handful of them that are really, really meaningful to the primary users of the financial statements, which are typically your bondholders or really the credit rating agencies. So that's really how I've structured this conversation. It's going to mirror past conversations, but again, just to kind of reiterate, just for some new folks or folks who might be just watching for the first time, that's really how this is designed, is to kind of speak to the rating and really add some perspective and context. So after the opinion, this is probably going to be the second place that your informed user is going to go to. And this is your governmental funds balance sheet. And they're going to go to that first column, that the general fund, the town's primary operating fund. And again, just to provide some context, when I say operating fund, for financial reporting, this is not only your main general fund, but also your general stabilization account. I just want to point that out because sometimes when we get into talking about unassigned fund balance, there's a little bit of a reconciliation as far as your unassigned fund balance to free cash. And the primary difference there is including your general your general stabilization account, because that's really looked at as really just kind of a restrictive savings account, if you will. And you're going to see it's the third number up from the bottom. Your unassigned fund balance in the general fund is $10.6 million. That is up over $4 million from the prior year. And looking back even to 2016, the town has gone from a unassigned fund balance of roughly $4.5 million to about $10.5 million. So you've seen a tremendous growth in this over the last handful of years, which is really something that the town has been striving to get to. Last year, that number was about $6.5 million. And that represented about 8.3% of your general fund operating budget. This year, the $10.5 million represents about 13.5% of your operating budget. Why I'm bringing up this year versus last year is I believe in prior conversations we've talked about really the 10% benchmark. And that's kind of in line with also what the Government Finance Officers Association recommends, between 10 and about 16%, which is about 2 months worth of operating expenditures. So we've talked I would say at length over the last handful of years about really the importance of that benchmark and really what it means, and allowing communities to build up the reserves and liquidity, and again put them in more of a proactive versus a reactive situation there, and that's largely driven by positive operating results. Some of that was due to COVID. There was an infusion of, you have ARPA money, you had CARES money, you had ESSER, but you also had really positive turnbacks in your appropriations and some conservative revenue estimates that hit pretty well there. So that all really rolls up into that significant increase in your general fund unassigned fund balance. So, that's certainly something I really want to emphasize. Again, I really think the theme is going to be positive, and it really starts here. We'll talk about the long-term liabilities, but I'm probably going to sound like a broken record. I've always said they need to be managed as such. You're not gonna deal with that overnight, but certainly from a short-term or near-term perspective, the town is trending in a very positive direction, and I certainly want to echo what the rating agencies said, and really, as it relates to the AA3 rating that has been maintained, that really relates to the town being, high quality, low credit risk, and really kind of in a stable position. In addition, yep.
A question about that. So you said some of the reason why we were able to build up that fund was because of ARPA, ESSER, the CARES Act. I know that there's some regulations that money has to be spent by 2026. Does this mean that money will have to be pulled out of this reserve and spent, or is this technically we were just able to allocate this money differently because we had those funds to cover other things?
I don't, it's not like you pulled in all this money and it's kind of sitting there. So like, for example, I believe $684,000 was brought in for revenue loss, which was really kind of essentially reimbursing the general fund, if you will, related to direct expenditures related to COVID. So that money in turn, and Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, really fell to free cash. So it's not like you have this money kind of sitting in a coffer that is then going to have to be, liquidated, if you will. And same thing with the CARES and the ESSER money. That was just, allowing, the schools to be able to utilize these additional funds for their designated purposes. So I think that, and Wendy, please feel free to, add to that. But I think, it's not like there's going to be, you're kind of sitting on this and it's going to be going out the door. I think the town is incredibly using funds that have been made available to them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, those funds are they're separate, reported separately from the general fund. So they're going to really show up in your non-major governmental funds column. And so that money would be received and spent out of that column versus the general fund. But what they help do is alleviate some of the pressure on the operating budget so that there are greater turnbacks at the end of the year that can increase that fund balance. The other thing too is we also make a point to put 50% of our free cash certification into the stabilization fund. And so that's also helped boost this unassigned fund balance.
Great point there, Wendy, because I think the general fund, the general stabilization fund, I believe about $900,000 was sent over. I think around $400,000 was also utilized. So you're looking at kind of a net gain there on your general stabilization fund side of about $500,000, and then coupled with your favorable budgetary operations, that all kind of work into that $4 million increase. Did that help, Kelly?
Very much, thank you.
So Wendy, that was just, as we was kind of getting into more positive aspects of fiscal 21, that's another thing, the continued funding of stabilization accounts. And, that's not really a set it and forget it, tuck money aside. The town's been very proactive in not only maintaining those accounts, but also, establishing those accounts, but also continuously, adding to that fund balance. And then in turn, your investment earnings, continue to increase as, as that fund balance goes up. In addition, and consistent with other practice, the town has continuously budgeted for capital outlay in the general fund to the tune of about $500,000. So that's always looked at as very favorable, where you can absorb some of your capital costs in your in your operations, as opposed to continuously going out and borrowing for it. And also to that end, and I know we're as of June 30, 2021, so I do want to, I understand that there's been some borrowings that have taken place subsequent to year end, as it relates to, a big school project and, some other sewer infrastructure. But as of June 30, 2021, and I think, certainly looking forward and again, managing these long-term liabilities, I would look at this as a very manageable debt burden. Your governmental activities or your general fund and your community preservation fund, 86% of your debt's paid off in 10 years. That's looked at as very favorable. Typically with, I would say, your AAA rated communities, if you look at a bond rating for those entities, they typically pay off about 75% in 10 years. So you're looking at 86%, which is above that metric. And on your business type activities, your water and your sewer fund, 68% is paid off in 10 years. So that's pretty close to that 75% benchmark. It's not looked at, I would say, as much as your governmental activities, because you have a little bit more flexibility as it relates to what you're charging the users and really the ratepayers. So that, I would still look at that as pretty favorable, even though it's a little bit below that 75% benchmark. I still think you're really looking at paying off your debt, certainly prior to the the asset still has some significant useful life after that, which is very, very important. So again, those are really the key factors that go into the town maintaining and really trying to, I think, looking ahead and trying to increase that bond rating. That's very much in line with the factors for an upgrade, if you will. So that's very consistent with what the rating agencies are looking for, and trying to elevate that credit rating. Now to the other side of that, Kelly, what I'll have you do is actually go back 2 pages, please. Yep, right here. And can you just scroll? Actually, no, this is fine. Now we're going to kind of transition into, I think, where I think probably some of the meat and potatoes of the conversation is going to be, and that really relates to your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. And you're going to see, I think it's about 3/4 of the way down under your non-current liabilities. You should see the headings: net pension liability, net OPEB liability. Maybe it's about halfway down. And so you have your governmental activities column, and then your business type activities column, and then your total. So your governmental activities is your general fund, your pretty much all the funds that we just saw segregated on the prior page, all really rolled up into one column. Your business type activities, your water and your sewer and your cable operations, again, all rolled up into one column, coming up with that total column furthest over to the right. And you're going to see your net pension liability is about $48.6 million. That's actually down from the prior year. I believe the prior year amount was about $53 million. And so let me take a step back here, just knowing that there's some folks who might not know what I'm talking about here that might be watching. So as a member of the Bristol County Retirement System, you make up about 11% of that system. And essentially there's an total unfunded liability, which they essentially measure the present value of benefits and versus what assets have been accumulated for that, coming up with either an unfunded liability or a surplus asset. And now the Bristol County Retirement System, consistent with pretty much every retirement system in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has an unfunded liability. This is something similar to OPEB, where every community has been trying to manage their long-term liabilities and fund them as such. The difference with pension versus OPEB is that there is some structure and a plan in place. As I said, went down, the funded ratio of the system went up from about 61% to about 65%. And Wendy actually shared with me fairly recently that, and even subsequent to year end, that that funded ratio has gone up to about 71%. So and the reason for that is, that the town has certainly seen that as it relates to dollars out the door in their increase to the retirement assessment each year, but you can see that you're kind of chipping away at that unfunded liability. And right now, the funding schedule is held, I believe, pretty flat at fully funded in 2035, which means, and again, a lot has to remain equal during that, that time frame, that next 13 years. But if things hold true to the assumptions that go into that valuation, that $48.6 million is going to become zero. Now, again, it doesn't just magically go away. It's still going to be managed as such. But again, I think as we talk about these liabilities, context and perspective, I think, is paramount, because I think when you look at these numbers of $48.6 million liability, and then even moving down to OPEB, that $180 million liability, those are pretty staggering numbers. But again, if you're looking at financial statements from the 352 communities that issue them in Massachusetts and then throughout the country, you're going to see everyone is really dealing with this. And again, the primary users, the rating agencies, they've always known these numbers existed. And I think that's why when you look at the credit rating, they talk about how are they being managed. It's not just where are we today, what's being done tomorrow. It's, how is this really going to impact you both from the short term and the long term perspective? And is the community being proactive in at least trying to put together some sort of plan? And as we've talked before, you don't have as much flexibility with pension because you're a member of a county retirement system. But I think what I've really tried to do is just, practice vigilance and try to understand, look at the notes that are in your financial statements. There's, some good information and disclosure on a lot of the key assumptions that really go into that liability. And the other thing is Massachusetts has PERAC, and they've been very active in trying to make sure that the assumptions are pretty reasonable. They're up with some of the best practices or better practices, I'll say, as it relates to your investment rate of return, your mortality rates, people living longer. Are they pretty consistent with your peers? Along with reality there. So again, there is some structure, there is a plan in place in time, and hopefully bringing that liability down to zero. Similarly, on the OPEB, or other post-employment benefits, OPEB, that relates primarily, to retiree healthcare. So over time, this is built up in a similar fashion to pension. Essentially, retirees are provided the benefit of staying on the town's health insurance, and what the recognition of the OPEB liability is doing is, right now you're paying the premiums as they come due. But what the accounting standards are requiring you to do is recognize that expense, that earned benefit that's going to come down, 30 years down the line after you retire. You're recognizing that liability over the course of the employee service life. And you can see that liability is about $179 million as of June 30, 2021. Pretty significant number. The funded ratio is about 0.12%. The town did establish a trust. There's about $217,000 in there, which is up probably $75,000 over the prior year. And that went up about $15 million over the prior year. I believe the liability is about $164 million there. The significant change there really relates to the discount rate that's being used, or investment rate of return being lower, mostly because you don't have the assets to generate enough of a return to really, generate that investment income, versus what would be the outflows, if you will. Along with, I talked about earlier, some of the assumptions that are changing, particularly the mortality tables. People are living longer, and that's being factored into the valuation, and that's been getting a lot of attention over the last couple of years. And the town went through a new valuation last year, and I believe the mortality tables were updated, and that's why you're seeing that pretty sizable increase over the last couple of years, if you will.
Ed, can I just get clarification? So
Please.
between last year and this year, it increased $15 million.
Correct. Last year's liability was 164 million.
I mean, at that trajectory, it becomes so outrageous that you have to ask yourself, and I'm sure a lot of communities do this, why even put anything towards it? That's like, throwing a deck chair off the Titanic. What do you think you're going to do there? Really?
No, that's a fair point. That's a very fair point. One of the things we've seen communities do, and this is where it can kind of go both ways, because the less assets you have, that liability does, it's on that trajectory that you had talked about. What is this going to do next year? Is that going to go up another $15 million? What I will caution, though, is I do believe the impact of the mortality table change had a sizable impact over the last 2 years. So I don't want to misspeak here or tell you something that's necessarily not true, but I'm hopeful that that's going to kind of hold, because, we're looking at the mortality tables, I believe, that were used. The ones that they're called the RP 2014 healthy annuitants table now. The ones that were used prior were the RP 2000. So I think you're looking at a pretty significant gap between the old versus the new. So I'm a little hopeful that those are going to kind of hold and are going to kind of be used for the next handful of years, that hopefully you're not seeing that massive increase due to that change in assumption. Because I think you're up to the latest and greatest, if you will, which is certainly going to be much more conservative. But
even if it's half that, right? Like, even if it's 7.5 million over the course of 10 years, compounded every year, it just gets out of control. And at the rate that we can contribute to it, it's just so slow. Now, I think I remember if you had mentioned last year that effort towards it is always a good thing for what may come in the future, because if a municipality demonstrates zero effort, then they might get a little less relief, whereas a municipality exhibits some form of effort, they might look at, the state or Fed might look at me and say, well, you have actually tried.
Yes, and that's how I would characterize that as, certainly doing something's better than nothing. But Mark, I think to your point, if we're throwing $25,000 a year, like what does that really tell? Someone who's looking at this, is that's really, to use your phrase, that's great. Throw the deck chair off the Titanic. But the only thing that I would add is that if there was a significant commitment to OPEB, let's hypothetically say that there's $4 million in this fund. You have $4 million in assets that essentially can be invested and utilized. You're going to see a significant increase in your discount rate. So right now you're using as low as you can go, which is the municipal bond rate, and that was 2.25% as of June 30, 2021. Now, I don't want to say this is a good thing, but where the markets went in June 30, 2022, I believe the community bond rate went up to, I think it was, when I talked to your actuary, I want to say it was like a little over 4%. So I'm actually interested, and I think, not to kick the can down the road, but I think I'm interested to see what the valuation is going to look like, because as that discount rate goes up, the present value of your projected benefits is going to go down. So you're going to see a pretty significant decrease in your liability. We've had communities that in years they've funded $1 million a year, they've appropriated, and from I'm going off memory here, but largely I remember seeing a $350 million liability go down to 175. Again, what does that mean? That's still a pretty staggering number, but you bring up very fair questions, because this, what can we do? And outside of radical changes where there are some states where they allow retirees to stay on the plan, but they pay 100% of the premium as opposed to 20%. So those are some of the things that down the line in years from now, those might be some changes that come. Whereas,
I have a question. So the retirees, if that was to be modified, who would make that decision? And what say do they have? I mean, so basically the way I'm looking at it is, let's say somebody's retired. My mother-in-law's retired. She was a teacher right here in Easton. And she sort of uses health insurance through the town. If one day it goes up to 100%, as you're mentioning, how does that process even occur?
So in Massachusetts, I'm not sure what the statute is, MGL 32, I don't know if it's 32B, but the statute, I believe, requires you cannot charge, this might even be an active employee and a retiree, you cannot charge more than 50% of a premium. So that's written in the statute. So that would have to come from the state to make that change. In
And
addition,
that would never happen.
probably not.
No, and on the other hand, nor should it too, because these people are also retired,
Right.
and they rely on their health care, and they don't have income, and other inflation and other things are really crushing them. So, I don't want to come across as somebody who's saying, let them pay more, but
Mark, I know for my mom, she was a city employee in Michigan, and they actually, when they changed their retirement benefits, she was grandfathered in. So there's certain like cutoff. So all new employees came on knowing that they were going to have to pay this in retirement, but everybody that was already hired was sort of grandfathered in. So there's like more compassionate ways to do that.
Right. And the retiree contribution rates could be changed. Right now, the split is the town pays 75% and employees pay 25%. So you could adjust those. If you do it for the active employees, though, you've got to bargain with all of your bargaining units. But you don't have to do that with retirees. That could affect the liability.
right. And that's where, for me, like an ethical question comes in, is you don't have a position to negotiate from. It's just us telling them, and there's a ethical dilemma that occurs in my brain when I hear that.
I echo that too, and that's why I feel like sorry, Kelly, if you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, I'd rather put in the hard work of negotiating than do that to retirees.
And I was just going to say, I feel bad even bringing some of these things up, but as you talk about managing the liability, these are some of the factors that just unfortunately go into it. Not telling you one way to do it, because I'm sure everyone, wants to certainly take care of the folks that have, put a lot of good public service in with their community. I think this is a benefit that, largely has been provided for those employees for good reason. But nonetheless, they all kind of roll up into that $180 million number, whether it's the amount that they pay for premiums, the service life, meaning I believe it's 10 years that you have to have essentially creditable service with the community to stay on the plan. Wendy's, I believe does that sound right? I believe it's
I think you vest in the retirement system after 10 years, but they did make some changes in 2012, I think it was, where I think in order to get your health insurance when you retire, I think you have to work longer.
Okay.
Than that.
So those are some of the things that also can be evaluated. And again, they're hard conversations to have. I certainly don't envy being a part of the negotiating team as it relates to that. But nonetheless, they certainly drive up that liability. And then people living longer too. They're staying on the health plan, 20, 25, even 30 years after they retire. So it's certainly something challenging to manage for sure.
Ed,
Yeah.
I have a question. How often
Yes.
do you update the mortality rates?
That's a great question. I feel like I've seen them updated 2 or 3 times in my 15 years with Melanson. So that is in accordance with actuarial standards. So I'm not entirely sure how frequently they come out. Or when they do a look back and kind of assess whether they need to be updated. But I think that's something that you can work through with the actuary as they put together the valuation on, are they going to make the change and why? What is that going to do to the liability? Is it reasonable? So my apologies, Kelly, for not having a definitive answer. But it's certainly not something that's done every year. Now, you do have a full OPEB valuation done every 2 years. The town does, and every other community does as well. And on those interim years, it's just an update. Essentially, you update the asset balance, account for any really material changes in benefit terms and things of that nature. But largely, it's kind of rolling forward your previous assumptions. But the mortality tables are not something that are going to be updated every other year. I think you're probably looking, I don't know, just to give you something to go off of, maybe every 7 years, every 8 years, something along those lines.
Thank you. And my other question is, I know my parents are getting to that retirement age and they have to go on Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so this is on top of Medicare, what people have for healthcare benefits? Okay.
Yeah,
That is-
so the retirees, they can get a Medicare supplement. But we did adopt the provision of the law that once you're retired and you do turn 65, you have to go on a Medicare plan. At one point, that was not a requirement. And so, we would still be paying for these active plans, but we've since remedied that. I think it's been well over 10 years that we've done that. So you just get a supplement, and it's definitely less expensive than an active plan.
Well, that's good.
The other thing I wanted to mention too is, with the net pension liability, we are paying a significant pension assessment every year, which is determined by an actuary. And eventually, if Bristol County can get to that point where they're fully funded, our annual contribution to Bristol County will be reduced significantly. And that money could be put towards funding the OPEB liability. But I mean, that's still kind of a moving target. I mean, we've pushed the date out to 2035. It's not gonna, the be all end all answer, but it would certainly help, if they can get to that point and
Wendy,
start
you said
reducing our assessment.
What do you mean by significant, like an approximation?
Probably at least half. I mean, we're paying, I think, about $5 million every year to Bristol County.
It was $4.8 million during fiscal year 21. Because that's one of the things that's rolled up into your pension assessment right now. You're not only paying for your actives, but you're also amortizing in that unfunded amount. You're kind of not only dealing with the now, but also trying to help get that liability that previously existed down to zero as of 2035. So moving forward, to Wendy's point, you're going to have some sort of pension assessment theoretically, but it should be significantly reduced. And a lot of communities are looking at kind of a similar game plan as it relates to OPEB, in really trying to use a infusion into your OPEB trust based on that pension assessment really going down. Any other questions on OPEB? I know it's always a fun conversation.
I mean, I feel like I could talk all night about this, but just, at the end of the night, I'll have the same feeling or concern that I have now, and nothing will change through no fault of anyone's. I think, healthcare costs have gone completely insane and are taking advantage of what they see. When you have an endless stream of money to pay for whatever procedure you need, they're going to look at that as an open checkbook and just, keep billing it out.
And that's a great point, Mark, too, is that is also a factor into the assumptions, is what is the healthcare cost trend rate doing? And, you can be looking at, an assumption of 9% a year. I mean, it's
Right.
Pardon me not being professional, it's crazy.
I look at this and what it reminds me of is college tuition. As soon as college loans became government backed, the cost for college education skyrocketed because they realized that all these loans are guaranteed. Well, same thing with this. Well, oh, so you're going to stay, we're going to provide you health insurance, but your municipality is going to cover it, which is a government. So therefore it has to be paid. They're just going to carry the debt, not actually pay it, but carry the debt. And it's like this game, this manipulation that occurs. It's loopholes in the system. And I don't know, it's like you can chase your tail all day and then something else will be created where it just sets you back.
Have you seen any other communities working on this, doing things that maybe we should think about doing? Or is anybody doing anything sort of different than what we are?
I would, yes, meaning I think it's a couple different things, and I would say there's been a more of an appetite to appropriate into that fund, meaning you might get your general or your capital stabilization fund to a level where I think it provides flexibility, and you might be able to, I don't want to say do away with it, but certainly table some of those initiatives, and maybe expand your capital plan, for example, and try to put money over into OPEB. You've seen, to what Wendy was saying, I think trying to, really look at the pension system. And this is probably more on the local governments that have their own individual retirement systems, where they'll work with their actuary and try to kind of come up with a aggressive or accelerated funding schedule to see if they can, if there's more of an appetite to try to address it, and instead of 10 years, maybe 7, to again free up some funding to move over. Other communities are trying to get creative, although it's been met with a little bit of resistance, but they're still in a roundabout way getting there. And what I mean by this is there's a number of communities that have opened up the cannabis dispensaries. And so what they're doing is they're trying to earmark those revenues, which are really new revenues, and move those into the OPEB trust fund. Now, we've had a couple communities that have tried to do that, and DOR has come back and said that you can't do that, even with, I think, a home rule petition. But what you can do, even if you have, Wendy had mentioned a free cash policy. Let's say the town could come up with a fund balance policy, if you will, and that money that came in, like let's say you got $500,000 in 21, that's going to fall to free cash. But what you can do is that your special, you could have a fall special town meeting that then appropriates that $500,000 over in your OPEB trust fund. So in trying to look at some of the newer revenue streams and not just really put that in the general fund and try to almost artificially build up a budget, if you will, they've tried to say we're going to keep growing as we have in the last handful of years and what we've projected to do, and utilize this new money and kind of tuck it away. So there is a little bit of creativity on that front with some of the newer revenue streams. I think maybe solar meter credits have been something we've seen that have popped up to a significant dollar level in some communities over the last handful of years. So trying to get creative on that front. But in all honesty, the conversations are pretty consistent with what we're having right now. It's a lot of, the numbers are staggering. What do we need to do?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to reconcile that, particularly when you want to pay teachers, firefighters, general government folks. It can be a hard sell. We certainly understand that, but I think communities are trying to get creative.
Yeah, back when the meals tax was first implemented, a number of communities basically took that new revenue stream once it passed, and they committed that to OPEB. But we just were not in a position where we could do that. We really needed those dollars just to put towards the operating budget, because I know Connor says every year when he does the budget presentation that we've got that structural revenue deficit. But it's true. We really do. When you just look at like our tax base and everything, and our categories of revenue with state aid, with us being a minimum aid community and not getting a lot of state aid, we rely so heavily on taxation, and our local receipts are just not enough to really, they help, but they're just such a small percent of our revenues that we can't eliminate that deficit.
Yeah, it's more significant to put towards what we need tomorrow and the next day than towards this.
Right.
Now, Ed, is there a target for increasing the balance to a point that we could use the discount rate from the underlying investments instead of that municipal bond rate?
There is, and I don't have that off the top of my head. But what I think would be beneficial, when you look at the valuation, the actuary can essentially put together different scenarios where they would, you can talk to them about potential future funding, which could, maybe you want to get a little bit more aggressive and put $100,000 a year instead of 25 or $200,000. Maybe just leave that by itself. Or you can do a kind of a hybrid methodology too, where, we're going to put in $100,000 till 2035. And then what do things look like if we put what is half of the pension assessment in? So you can the actuarial community does do this as part of the service as it relates to, putting together an OPEB plan. So my apologies for not really having a concrete, but you can have those conversations, and honestly, that really helps them, because outside of having like a written plan that kind of forecasts what you want to do, unfortunately, they really go on past practice as, future behavior. But if you put together something that says, look, we really want to at least take some steps in, they're not going to hold you to it. Just like any other, it's a policy, it's a guideline. It's not, you're not going to really, tie your hands. But I think it might even help the actuary and say, well, this is what some of the, because we've seen that where it's here's the funding 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and the actuaries might say, okay, we'll give you a little credit now where that discount rate goes up to 4%. But they're going to, in 5 years, they're going to do a look back and then say, well, were you even closer in the ballpark? And they'll probably revise accordingly, but they're going to give you some credit, I think, for at least trying to put some structure together in developing that asset balance.
Okay. Wendy, do you know if we've had any of those conversations in the past with the actuaries who are working on OPEB? I feel like, sort of similar to how years ago, getting our reserves up to a target of having, the balance that we have now seemed, like a nice wish, right? And then, but having some targets where we made those tough decisions at town meeting every year, where we said, okay, we're going to stick to this, and we're not going to pull from free cash to fund X, Y, or Z, or we are going to actually fund that stabilization fund. I think having that path forward has paid off, and that maybe having at least some options that look a little bit concrete to help get that discount rate down, so that we're looking at a more manageable liability and have an asset pool that's actually going to start to grow in a meaningful way that can help actually offset some of this versus just the few $100,000 might be just helpful for framing some conversations and decisions going forward.
Yeah, we can have those conversations too with the actuary. I know also one of the things that they do when they send out the report, which I can distribute to the committee, is they usually do some kind of sensitivity analysis where it shows, what your liability would be if certain factors change, like increase or decrease.
Yep. I think there was, that's in here in the report. So let's see, the current discount rate is 2.25. So a 1% increase in the discount rate would drop it down to 150. So that's almost $40 million if we can get up to an assumption of 3.25 instead of 2.25. And then the healthcare cost trends sensitivities in there as well. Where boy, with an increase in that.
For next year, though, I mean, I would like to see a graph that demonstrates exactly what Jen is suggesting. That seems to make sense to me. In order to get to that next level where you're going to reduce it by $30 or $40 million, you have to contribute X amount per year to what end?
Mhm.
You know, not with the goal of paying it all off, but with
Yep.
the goal of getting to that next level to save tens of millions of dollars. And is it possible? Is it reasonable? Turning around to the town and asking for them to support this, is that fiscally responsible on our part? Like, you know, that's stuff we don't know, which I think that's, if we're seriously going to look at OPEB, I think that is the next step, what Jen had just suggested. But if, you know, chart or graph where we can actually see where this all falls into place.
I feel like that's a great suggestion because, like you said, it becomes a little bit less overwhelming if there's a goal and a benefit to achieving that goal. So I definitely think that not
Like
only,
just throwing $100,000 at it, to me, that seems irresponsible. Like,
Yeah.
well, you know, with what is your goal in doing that? To what end are you going to continue to do that? How much are you going to do that every year? Like, what is your purpose? If you turned to me now and said, "Hey, Mark, do you think we should allocate $100,000 towards that next year?" I'd say no, actually, I don't, because it's just throwing money at it. And you don't throw money at a problem. You try to solve a problem before you start acting on a problem. And I don't think there's been any solving through no fault of anyone's, but you know, there's not, we haven't solved anything.
well, it seems like we're in a good position now with 13.5% for, you know, where we're at in reserves. And so now we're at a point where we can really start looking at this and planning. And I think if you told people this is what we're going to throw at it and it's going to save us $30, $40 million, then they would be all for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the analysis to prove that that's what will occur.
Right.
I think that makes the most sense to me. And again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, just managing these long-term liabilities. You know, you're not going to fix it overnight, but you know, to Mark's point, really everyone on this, we're going to, if nothing else changes, we're going to be having the same conversations, you know, year over year. And I think it's, you know, I'm certainly a visual person. Even if I hear people talk about OPEB, you know, it goes over my head too. And I think really being able to see what, you know, dollars in, you know, what does that do? And, you know, that to me is, you know, visually would help me be able to understand the concept. And I think be able to explain that to people, because it's a hard concept to sell. It really is. You know, particularly when you have other needs, as, you know, Wendy had mentioned, you know, the town has really tried to get the reserves up and dealing with the structural deficit. You know, that's a problem. And that's certainly probably front and center, as opposed to, well, hey guys, guys and girls, we have a $180 million liability we got to take care of. I mean, that's, you know, you're not going to win anyone over with that. So I think this is a great first step in, you know, trying to manage this appropriately. And how do you really make proactive and meaningful decisions. Nothing like talking about OPEB the day after Labor Day weekend.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I really, you know, the town has got to go from a position where we're not just on a pay-as-you-go basis. I mean, that's years ago. I mean, I remember back in the 90s when I used to do municipal audits for an auditing firm. Like a lot of pension systems were on a pay-as-you-go system, and that had to change. And I mean, something's got to give for this too, because, you know, how do you crack a $174 million liability? I mean, it's, you know, I think there's going to need to be some legislative changes too. I think employees are going to have to pay more.
There's also something wrong with the healthcare industry where they're charging these outrageous amounts,
Mm-hmm.
taking advantage of an open door that they see.
Yeah.
I do think the good news here, though, in the report is that when the town sets its goal, at least the current administration of the town, when they set their goals, they achieve them. And so I think, you know, just having a written up strategy and plan, you know, even if we're making progress towards it, not fully realizing it, it's gonna be a good thing.
You know, maybe we might need to just reassess some of our financial management guidelines too, and adjust some of our goals. Yeah, at least if we're doing something, you know, and that's, you know, at least right now, you know, with the rating agencies, they're looking to see that you are doing something at least. You know, even though $25,000 is, you know, not a lot, it's something. And now we've put it in the budget so that it's a permanent thing and not just a here and there kind of thing, which is better than doing nothing at all.
Well,
And
for the moment though, I kind of support not doing anything until I see that analysis, so I know what the benefit is of doing that something. Like right now, I don't even know, like, do we have to do $100,000 a year and for how many years? I'm completely blind and I don't know how much it will cost to get to that next level. So if somebody from the town said to me, well, at what point, you know, can the savings kick in? My answer is, I don't know. And I think, shame on me, I should know that. Because I wouldn't support putting money towards something I don't know what the end result could potentially be. You know what I mean? So I do think the very next thing that needs to be done is that, and it's not even like an in-depth analysis. It's like a pretty rudimentary, contribute X amount for this many years, gets you to this level, and then everything drops. That after we hear that information or learn that information, then decisions can be made as to policy changes. But to talk about policy changes without that information, I don't have enough information to make those decisions. I don't think anyone should be making those decisions without that information.
So Wendy, what are the next steps to get that information?
So we are going to be doing another analysis, another valuation for fiscal 22. So this would be a great time to incorporate, you know, some of those things into this valuation. I mean, even if they do it to the side, you know, because I don't know if their report is kind of prescriptive and, you know, how they issue it, but they can definitely do some further analysis for us. I'm sure they would love to do that for us, where they can tell us, you know, things like, you know, how much will we have to contribute just to keep the liability even from growing.
Yes, like that's,
you know,
one column, and then the next column is contribute X amount, so your point scale changes, and you know you saved the $30 million. Like, give me some targets.
Right. If you know, we get to the point with a collective bargaining agreements where like everybody who is like eligible for health insurance will kick in a certain amount towards OPEB, like, you know, what would that do to the liability?
Right.
You know,
like right now, I feel like
something
there's information that's being presented where it's like, this is how bad it is. Hard stop.
Yeah.
This is how bad it is. These are your options. These are the potential solutions. This will slow you from drowning. It's just, this is the bad news. Well, let's commiserate.
It's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah. It got way worse than last year and way worse than the year before.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, even if some things, you know, change where the, you know, it kind of slows the impact on the liability is going to go up every year. You know, absent some significant changes or changes in contribution rates, that it's going to go up every year. May just not go up as much in some years, but it's definitely a moving target in the upward direction.
Can I ask a question? When this is calculated, you know, I know that we have new housing developments going up and affordable housing, and that sort of requiring a larger infrastructure. Is all that being calculated into the assumptions here as well? The town, the growing and having to hire more teachers and.
No, I don't think it takes into like employment projections into consideration. I think it looks just at who we've got now and like who's eligible. I think they do, you know, one thing they do look at is you might have employees that don't take the health insurance but are eligible for the health insurance. And I think that there is some factoring in of that. But to my knowledge, they do not look at projected employment, you know, increases in future years.
Is that thought about at all when, you know, sort of deciding on whether or not to do these developments or how?
I don't.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, I just want to mention, like, it's as far as like if like you think there might be more teachers because like enrollment in the school would be going up, because the enrollment trend in Easton, but also the state, like in many places, is the enrollment is actually going down.
So I think, Kelly, for your concern, if it's for capital projects, the answer is no, it has no effect on it. So infrastructure build outs, a new school, all that stuff has no bearing on this at all. It's a capital project. If your concern is increased employment, they're also, these people, they're just starting, so part of their contract, I do think considers this, and their retirement package is reflective of not making this mistake again. So people who are just even retiring tomorrow, let's say, they don't have the amazing deal that somebody who's, say, 80 years old and retired 20 years ago has. They're a little bit different. So I think there is a bit of factoring into the future of, if somebody's employed now, we can't continue this trajectory.
Yes, that's what I was wondering about. So thank you, Mark.
Pardon me, I was on mute. Those were really just kind of some of the key highlights I really wanted us to discuss. Jennifer, I don't know if this is maybe a good time to talk about some of your other questions or other items of discussion, if you will.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So if we want to just go through the report, there are a couple of edits that I would suggest. So on page 7.
Yep.
Let's see. Page 7, the second paragraph. There we are. The second line up from the second paragraph reads 58,375,000. I believe that's 158,375.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. On page 24, there's a reference to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen was renamed the Select Board in the past few years. So any references to Board of Selectmen should be updated. That was the only one that caught my eye.
Yeah, I just wanted to go to the front page of the independent audit report that says Select Board. Is that in the budgetary? Say 20. What page was it, Jennifer? I'm sorry.
It was page 24.
Yep.
Yeah, second paragraph. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Page 27, and this is where my English degree comes in. Just go.
Well, this will be well received because I am an accountant.
The third paragraph, that first sentence is not a complete sentence. So I don't know if it's supposed to maybe read the town invests in the MMDT.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All righty. And then just one more small one on page 30. I believe so. In that big paragraph, the 6th line down where it reads U.S. government obligations, I believe that that there should be a VAT after obligations. Investments may be made in unconditionally guaranteed U.S. government obligations that have maturities of a year or less. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Thank you.
Good.
Yep. And then let's see, page 32. Oh, so on page 32, so we get into credit risk, interest rate risk, and foreign currency risk, and it's noted that the town does not have policies around the concentration of credit risk exposure, et cetera. I can see from the results that it's a non-issue, right? That we don't have more than 5% in one issuer, et cetera. But I was wondering, is it common for towns to have an investment policy that would explicitly restrict those items that were noted on the page?
Most of the I'm kind of chuckling here because this question kind of comes up when you read a lot of this and you see the town does not have formal investment policies. There's a requirement from GASB 40 that is explicit. Does the policy address these items?
Mm-hmm.
Most don't have these elements, if you will. Some do, don't get me wrong, because they, many folks have seen these pages and they say, well, what do you mean we have policies? Most of the investment policies will, have some strategies, but then also just reference Mass General Law on what allowable investments are.
Okay.
It's still a pretty good, I would say it's a pretty good initiative to have, policies that some of these things, but one of the good things is I think Mass General Law does a pretty good job of lowering risk and trying to, essentially promote more conservative type of strategies.
Mm-hmm.
This might be, more of an issue kind of outside of Massachusetts and in New England. But some do and some don't. I'd probably put it at, I don't know, of those that have investment policies, maybe 35% incorporate these particular elements, and others are a little bit more just kind of standard. Here's our strategy, if you will.
Okay, great, thanks. Page 39. And I know this has been static from prior years, so I probably asked this in the past and don't recall what the answer was. What's the $4 million in intangible assets? It's under capital assets.
Good question.
I believe that is the preservation restriction on shovel works from the Community Preservation Fund.
That sounds right, Wendy.
Okay.
Jennifer, if you don't mind, I can certainly get back to you and confirm on that and looking at our work papers, but if that sounds to be accurate, Wendy, yes.
Okay.
I think it's mostly shovel works because we do have other preservation restrictions that we purchased on the Governor Ames estate also. So I think it might be like 3.5 million for shovel works and 500,000 for Governor Ames estate.
Yeah, that's fine. No need to follow up. That makes sense. Okay. On page 41, I noticed that there's a highlight and was wondering what that is. Are we missing the date of issue?
Yes, I believe Wendy had given that to Sarah the other day. We have, so that will be completed. We do have that information.
Okay. And let's see, on page 43, there's a note in that paragraph about a 270-day reporting period after the close of the fiscal year. And I'm wondering, kind of given where we are in relation to June 30th of 2021, are we late on that? Is that an issue?
It's not an issue. The continuing, ideally, the final financial statements would be issued within that particular time frame. However, there are other elements of meeting the continuing disclosure requirement and filings, which has been met as of March, probably 24th.
Okay, great.
And then that will be amended when this document goes final. But there is nothing that's been out of compliance per se.
Okay. All right, great. And then let's see, I think this one we might have answered already. Okay. Yeah, that was those were all of the things I noted in doing a close reading. And then I guess my final question would be, and I think we discuss this every year, and we've covered some of it, but what else do we need to do to get the bond rating up to the next level?
Mm-hmm. I think it does go back to a lot of what we've talked about here. I think reserves are probably number one. I feel like that's something that has always been in the rating year over year. Just as, to what Wendy was saying with the structural deficit and needing free cash to balance the budget, that has probably hindered the community. And, particularly with Massachusetts entities, I think reserves get a little bit more, pardon me, I don't want to, I think there's a little bit more emphasis or scrutiny on that, given the Prop 2.5 limitations. Communities can only raise so much, and I think that that's where there's a little bit more emphasis placed there, and also trying to be in accordance with some of the recommended best practices, like the GFOA. I believe they say 2 months. That was the last white paper I looked at, which is roughly 16%. So the town has done really, really well to move from what was probably roughly 6% of your budget to now. And again, this also includes stabilization to the tune of like $3.9 million, but you're at about 13.5% now. So you're kind of in a pretty good spot from that 10 to 16% range. But I think it's one thing to get there, but then to have it kind of fall off is not what you want. So you do want to look at trying to maintain that and showing a history of doing that. As opposed to just, we check the box, if you will. And I think that's always been the goal of the town and the group and the administration is, we don't want to just get there. This is kind of what we need.
Right. Once you get there, you've got to maintain that rating. And we have talked to Moody's about this for the last couple of years, and they did send us a set of metrics that they sort of look at, and they, how does Easton compare to other communities that have, the next highest rating. And, again, even though we've made improvements in our reserves, we still have a little bit of a ways to go. And we need to be in a position where we can eliminate that structural revenue deficit to do that. But I can send you, some things that they sent us regarding those metrics that they look at. I can send that to the committee.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting just to have as a reference. Thank you.
And then I think on the other side of it is managing the debt burden, as I talked about. As of June 30, 2021, I think it's looked at as pretty favorable. You're looking at a pretty rapid payout of your debt, and again, that's looked at as a good thing. You're paying it off before that that asset is still in service. Where if it's the opposite, the asset is out of service, but you're still paying the debt. Like some people do with a used car. You're almost getting double whacked because you're going to need more of those assets, and you're paying almost double the debt. So I think trying to be, I don't want, aggressive is probably a poor term, but again, trying to make sure you have a fairly rapid payout of your debt and trying to extinguish it within that 10 to 15 years. What I will say though is the rating agencies do understand when you have sizable capital projects. I remember, I think it was like Newton North built a $200 million school. When you look, if you look at their payouts over 10 to 15 years, they're a little skewed, but you get a building that's going to exist for, who knows how long. So you do have some wiggle room and some other factors for consideration, but I think a common theme would be try to pay off your debt, within that 10 to 15 year window, depending on the asset type.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely going to change, with the issuance of the school bonds, and that's level debt. So level debt, means you're going to be paying less principal initially and more principal later because you're going to pay more interest up front. Just like your mortgage. Our debt now as of June 30th is it's like 87 million because of the project. But they don't just look at the total number. They also look at, where did that debt come from? And because it's excludable debt coming from a debt exclusion, that is definitely looked at, certainly way more favorably than it would be if we were just taking it out of the tax levy. We also have our water projects too, which are coming on for PFAS and water filtration facilities. But we've also done rate studies, and we have a schedule rate increases to deal with that. So that's also looked at favorably.
Agreed. We talk about it as debt, but also don't forget it's investing back in the community too, which certainly can be looked at as in a positive light too.
Okay. So reserves, managing debt, any other key components that we should sort of have on our radar?
I think I'm not trying to overburden. I think those would probably be the primary drivers and focuses. Yeah, and really just kind of what we've talked about tonight. I'm sure having, you can probably find ways to put together more policies and procedures that, that speak to the management of the town. But I think that's always been looked at as pretty strong. So we do have some communities, that have no policies and procedures whatsoever that, we would really be telling them, while policies and procedures can be a challenge to pull together, but it's to what Mark was saying earlier, even with OPEB, it's something tangible and it's something that can guide you. And from a community standpoint, and looking at whether it's 2, 5, 10, 20 years down the line, while they're a pain to pull together, again, it's something that can promote continuity of operations and internal controls too. And that's where there's a lot of value there. It's because it's one thing you could have, whether it's this group or Connor, an active citizenry, you might not have that 10 years from now. So people just kind of operate in a positive light. But if you can adopt some of these policies and guidelines, that's going to, promote, continuity of operations and really expectations, if you will.
So that covers all of my questions. Thank you. So Mark and Kelly, I don't know if either of you have anything else before we maybe move on to the management letter.
I guess the only other question I have is, are there any concerns, for the town or even state level concerns that might be coming along the way that we haven't discussed?
Maybe as we transition into the management letter, this isn't necessarily something that's in there, but this conversation just continues to, I feel like, get a lot of attention, and rightfully so. Particularly as we went to a virtual world, or really kind of electronic driven landscape, is your IT and cybersecurity risk. I think that just is something that is really dominating conversation and exploratory and preliminary discussions, just because it's entities that are small, large, complex, even ones that are very well run and really promote really sound best practices. Anyone's vulnerable. It's not just the mom and pop shop, or a town where the fire chief is the town accountant and the dog catcher. It can impact anyone, and there's still a significant newness to to understanding your risks, how to address them, how to educate employees. It's really getting a lot of attention, even looking at your insurance policies. I know that's one thing. I'm sure Moody's and S&P asked about that. What do you have for cybersecurity protection in your insurance? And the state does have some pretty good programs too. I remember at one of our Mass Society meetings, one of our conferences, we had a couple folks from the state, and they talked about some of their training programs and some of their assessments that they can do. And they might even be free to municipalities. I'm not certain of that, but those are things I would probably at least start, having conversations about and talking about, because at a moment's notice, something could happen very, very easily. And how to not put the town in a vulnerable position where, in theory, it could be pretty detrimental.
And it has been for some communities that we've seen. But I will say that one of the things that we are looking at is, Maya, our insurance carrier, they're always, more and more, they're asking more and more questions about what we're doing for cybersecurity. We did some training for the employees where they had to complete these training modules from the state, where you could better recognize like phishing emails and things like that. We're also going to put a capital request in this fall to do a network assessment, so that we can, have somebody come in and kind of see like where there might be weaknesses, and we can, address those.
That's great. That's where I think, sorry, Wendy.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, because, you know, the insurance carriers, they don't want to cover you for cybersecurity, if, you know, for cyber crimes, if you are not, you know, kind of keeping your systems up to snuff.
Mhm.
We
And
have to work on that.
you know, we're seeing a lot of communities really enter that we'll call phase one. You know, this is, I think, just a pretty consistent conversation in really doing that overall assessment. You know, even identifying some of those, you know, very rarely used software programs that, you know, aren't really supported and could be targeted. So it's really trying to get a sense as to what's our overall infrastructure, and then really trying to look at some of the vulnerability points, both internal and external. And, you know, similar to OPEB, it's, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And, you know, you really need someone who's got the expertise and the specialization to be able to come in and do that assessment, because it is pretty complex, I will tell you that. And, you know, having that report and, you know, take it for what it's worth. You know, you might have some vulnerabilities, but I think just be open to, you know, what those are. And again, how do we be proactive in addressing them?
One thing that we do have, which I think has been very helpful, is we have this software that you have to run it from the server, but it's through this company that we use, Bulletproof. And basically, it will not allow certain like executable files to download and run. They'll get blocked, and people are they have to call, you know, the IT manager and see if he will allow it. So that definitely helps. So people try to click on attachments. I mean, I still try not to click on attachments, but you know, I am able to like load stuff, but for the most part, like most people cannot do that. So, and that's definitely helped a lot.
Right. So from there, do you want to transition into the, was that that help, Jennifer, answer your question? I think that really was just kind of front and center as far as, you know, things to do. I just feel like it's something that folks talk about. You know, this is kind of OPEB 10 years ago, but now there's a lot of discussion. But, you know, what are some of the, you know, how do we put some of these thoughts into potential action items?
Great. Yeah. Kelly, did you have any other questions? It was a great question.
No, that's it. Thanks.
Kelly, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. And Mark, anything that you wanted to ask before we look at the letter?
I do not.
Okay. All right. So Kelly, do you have the letter? Could you maybe pull that up?
The letter, is that the same document or
No, Wendy
Is it
sent
different?
it today.
just before we met today?
Yeah.
Okay, so the letter, there's 3 attachments in here.
So I think it's the Easton ML 21.
Yes.
ML21, okay. Sorry, my computer's acting a little slow.
That's fine. And I can even enter in, just start at least the comment. Oh, here we go. There were no new comments this year. There are 2 prior year recommendations that are, you know, I think where improvements could be made. And the last one is really an informational comment and just trying to prepare for next year, but just trying to bring, just really, it's why it's in the management letter is really to reemphasize that, you know, this is something that we need to deal with as far as implementation in 2022, you know, to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So Kelly, you can actually scroll down to page 2. That was 3, I'm sorry. So the first comment really relates to, you know, to OPEB. And, you know, we had talked about putting assets aside in the trust. You know, and one of the good things about putting the assets aside is you can invest the money accordingly, and you know, you have whether it's interest income, realized or unrealized gains and losses. And, one thing that's being done right now is the way that the activity is booked is that it's recorded at book value as opposed to fair value. So those unrealized gains that came during the year were not initially reflected in the general ledger, and it wasn't a lot of money, but we proposed an audit adjustment. And the reason being is when you look at the OPEB valuation, that does take into account the bank balance at fair value, which incorporated these increases. And again, the amounts were not significantly different, but all the elements in the financial statements need to speak to one another. So you can't have an asset balance in your financial statements that differs from what you have in your RSI. So that is one of the primary reasons, is to have it to talk to that. But I think too, the investment should be reported at fair value. That's a requirement by GASB 72. And I think also just paints a better picture as to where you stand as of the end of the fiscal year. So Wendy and I had talked about this, and I don't anticipate this being here in June 30, 2022 and forward. I think it's a pretty easy fix that at least for 22 will come as a year end adjustment that Wendy does, like most communities do, and then moving forward, what's the best way to do that, whether it's quarterly, annually, what have you. But again, not really a massive comment, but I think one that it's very fixable, and again, it speaks to different elements of the financial statements that should agree.
Yeah, but honestly, we actually thought we would just be more conservative to just kind of keep things at book value versus recording like unrealized gains. But on the flip side of that, you can have unrealized losses too that you want to also reflect. So we're definitely going to do this going forward. We reconcile, we were just reconciled with the book balance, but we'll just write it to whatever the fair market value is. And we'll do that every month going forward.
On to the second one, improve reconciliation process of ambulance receivables. And a lot of this really relates to some of the older balances that are still on the books from years ago, and using an old service provider, and having some old stale receivables on the books. So we've talked about putting together almost like a write-off policy, because if you look at a lot of these receivables, they've been uncollectible for a number of years. That's not necessarily anything related to the town of Easton, just the nature. Margaret talked about escalating healthcare costs, and insurance is only covering X amount of dollars. And many communities that provide these services see a lot of old stale receivables that unfortunately, because of the contractual allowances, these balances just largely remain unpaid. So this really centers around kind of cleaning up the books. And Wendy and Adelia have done a really good job over the last handful of years, of more so with the current receivables, of trying to really reconcile the activity. But where things can be a little bit of a challenge is there's always timing issues at month end and then year end. They have these adjustments to the receivable that aren't really clear as to what they are. So how that jives with the inflows to the town versus the reporting that's done by, I believe is it Pro EMS, Wendy?
Pro EMS, yeah.
There are some reconciling items, but I will say in the last certainly 2 years, I think it's been much more of an active reconciliation in reconciling the activity with some of the lingering issues deal with probably going back 3+ years now.
Yeah. Yep. And we reconcile the receipts. It's definitely been a goal of ours to go back and go through everything. Be honest, we just cannot seem to get to it every year. The amount of receipts that just go through the town, the volume is incredible, just in 1 month alone. So my assistant, she spends a lot of time going through those, because we want to make sure we at least capture the actual revenue part of it. But it is in my goals this year to develop an ambulance abatement policy, and it's also in the fire chief's goals also. And we're going to work on that together to bring that to the select board to have them adopt that.
And I think that would just simplify things. It's really just kind of cleaning up the
Mhm.
balance sheet. You know, when you look at, well, whoa, we got these receivables on the books. Fortunately, they're offset by, not to get overly technical, a deferred revenue. So it's not like you've recognized revenue that didn't exist. That's the good thing about short-term governmental accounting, is you don't really recognize revenue until the cash is collected, for the most part. So it's really just kind of a, I hate to say it, more of like a housekeeping item at this point, because those receivables are really, I mean, you're looking at probably 5+ years, if not more. Any other questions on that? And then lastly, is a new standard that's being implemented in FY22. It was delayed a year due to COVID, which is actually a fortunate thing, because this is, we've been able to kind of really get some better data to utilize during the implementation, because I thought it was a little quick to jump into this. But really, the recognition of leases is changing. It used to be looked at as operating leases and capital leases, and now I'm almost even hesitant to say leases, because you have to kind of look at every situation differently, and it's really a right to use from a lessee and a lessor standpoint. So what you're looking at is a combination of, I think, some new elements potentially coming on your balance sheet as potential leased assets and lease liabilities. Fortunately, Wendy and I were having a conversation, and then just from some past experience, the town doesn't necessarily lease there's not a lot of lease activity, so I don't think this is going to be a massive undertaking, but I'm going to try to provide Wendy some guidelines and some other examples. But there's things that, pardon me, maybe were out of the scope that are really coming in, leased land that the cell towers are on, or solar panels, even it's probably small dollars, but lease copiers and things like that. What we need to do is really kind of come up with a list of some potential elements that might fall under GASB 87 and leases. And so what we're going to do is, we have a template that really identifies what all the necessary components are necessary for not only potentially proposing the adjustment for the financial statements and the related disclosure, but at least consideration to say, Ed, here are some of the things that we at least need to discuss, because that, from an audit standpoint, is the challenge that we're dealing with, is dealing with the quote unquote completeness of this. Our hands are a little tied as to the ins and outs of all the operations, but we'll really be looking to work with Wendy in the finance department to identify some of these items that potentially need to be considered. But we'll share that template. And I don't see this being a really significant exercise in implementing, but there's some newness to it. There might be a couple quirks, and things will look a little bit differently in the financial statements next year, potentially.
I think even just getting some examples, like when we were talking, just about like the cell tower, and like we've got the solar on the landfill. We actually get a lease payment in from the company that put those solar panels there. So those are some things that will probably end up coming into the financial statements. But in terms of the town leasing things, like we don't do a lot of like lease purchasing or whatever. Like we don't even lease copiers. Actually, we buy them. I think the few leases that we have a postage meter that we lease. I know the school department, they've got the lease that will be coming to an end for the administrative offices. So there really isn't that much, but it's also good to get examples of different types of leasing situations, because you might not even call something a lease, but it might meet the definition. So we'll work to get that squared away.
Agreed. That's the key takeaway is we got to evaluate the definition, not the word. That, but it's not going to be there will be no issue with the implementation, that's for sure.
Okay. All right, great. Well, Wendy, kudos to your department. Those look like all extremely minor things to be pointing out. So once again, you guys, you're doing a great job. And I know that letter was a little longer in the past and that there were a few things that had lingered from year to year. So it's nice to see those cleaned up. So thank you to you and your team for all of your effort in, getting things in good shape. It seems like things are happening in a more timely manner, and it's just great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Let's see. So is there anything else we wanted to discuss while Ed's here? We have a few other sort of kind of housekeeping items on the agenda.
Yeah. So we do have the audit contract.
Okay.
So when we last met, we had talked about it, but we didn't really. I think I I had probably indicated I was probably leaning towards like looking at maybe like a one-year contract, because in order to get 3 years or 3-year proposals was going to take a lot longer, because the last time we met was March. The year was starting to come to an end. We were still in budget season. That does take time to get that information together and make your evaluations and then award the contract. So I would be in favor of another 1-year contract.
Okay.
Fiscal 22 audit. There is in that email, there was a proposal.
Yes, I'm just pulling that up now. And then Wendy, what would be, because it's been a while since we've done a benchmarking, right? So what would be the process for doing a benchmarking before entering into a longer term contract again?
So typically what we do is we put together a scope of work, and usually it just gets sent out to several auditing firms.
Okay. Let's see.
I think I had asked last time, I don't remember. Is there a benefit to entering a 3-year contract versus a 1-year contract?
Not having to issue a contract every year.
I mean, financial benefit. Like, is there a discount for doing it over the course of 3 years versus 1?
I have to defer to Ed on that one.
Yes and no. We certainly that is helpful to the audit process. Knowing, certainly when we're new to a community, you're going to have a lot of upfront costs. So if you're only going in there for a year or 3 years, and there might be a rotation, that can be a little challenging because you have a lot more bases to cover. But we do look at longer commitments as opportunities. Regardless, our costs are going up, but that's what's in the in the proposed fee there. But Kelly, to your point, we certainly look at that as an advantage. We know, and that's not to, let me take a step back. That's not to say sign on for 3 years, but there's just knowing that you have. I just feel like you can even do more of a risk-based audit, knowing that you can build off of the prior years. So there are strategic elements that can be built in. And again, that's not to say that we don't look at what we're supposed to, but I feel like knowing that you have a 3-year commitment, you can kind of map things out. A little bit more. Maybe you can emphasize something more in year 1 versus trying to deal with many different items. Some might be really low-hanging fruit, if you will. So there is definitely opportunity to that. Yes, we've gotten that question before, and we've certainly worked with folks, and and understanding that. Okay, thank you for the commitment, and here's how we can incorporate it as such.
How do you feel about that? Does that change your view at all? I mean, I defer mostly to you on this. So does that change anything? Because you had mentioned 1 year was, you had mentioned 1 year.
Was that to
I
me,
think-
Mark, or was that
That's
to
to Wendy.
Wendy?
Oh, sorry. I mean, that definitely makes sense. I'm a longer term contract, I mean, is certainly fine with me.
I mean, I know, and just to be fair, so also the flip side of that is when you have somebody who's under contract for a number of years, sometimes it's also a good idea to switch it up because it's a fresh set of eyes.
Mhm.
And sometimes when you're given the same amount of information, the same information over and over again, you're seeing the same things you saw year after year. You're only focusing on them through no fault of anyone's. It's just, human habit. So sometimes it is good to change it up for fresh eyes. That is the flip side.
Yeah, but I think that definitely has come up. I know that was something that Len Berkowitz was very cognizant of.
Yep.
About having, even within the same firm, you switch over to who the lead on the audit is. So you do have that fresh set of eyes, but don't need to go through the whole contracting process. So I think what I'd like to do is, not drag this out, but I think it would make sense to do the 1 year contract. And then Wendy, if we can move ahead with the fee benchmarking and not take a whole year to do that if we have time, and then we can enter into maybe a multi-year contract, after that benchmarking's done. But I do think, we should just do our due diligence and go check the market before entering into a multi-year contract. So,
Sounds good.
yeah, how does the rest of the committee feel? Any thoughts on that?
Half of the town.
I didn't understand you, Mark. What did you say?
I said, I think that is responsible on behalf of the town.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So we have, so Wendy, I know it doesn't specify a vote on this, but are we okay to go ahead and we're just looking for feedback or a formal vote from the committee?
I think it would be good for the committee to take a vote.
Okay. All right, great. So all in favor of accepting the proposed 1 year contract and this will be for the fiscal year 2022 audit,
Yes.
with the understanding that we will then proceed with the due diligence, fee benchmarking, and then consider a longer term proposal.
Motion, Jen?
Yes, sorry.
So moved.
Okay. All righty. So, and can I get a second? So I'll make the motion. Are you seconding, Mark?
Yes, so moved.
Okay. Okay. And then roll call vote. Star, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Hey, Lamb, yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So then I think the next item on the agenda is just approving minutes and then seeing if the committee has anything else that we want to discuss. So Ed, I think we can let you go. Thank you so much for your time, your thoroughness, for answering all of our questions and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I really look forward to this meeting every year. So, thank you for also being engaged, attentive, and asking some very pointed questions and having good conversation. It doesn't always happen. So I kind of get excited when it does. So I know the meeting's a little long, but thank you again. We look forward to continuing our relationship with the town. And Wendy, thank you again for everything too.
Thank you.
All righty. Take care. Have a good
Thanks.
evening, everyone.
Have a good night.
Night.
Okay. Let's see. So over to the minutes. So Mark and Kelly, I don't know if you had time to review these before the meeting. If you want to take a minute to read them, if you need to, we can take that time now. I was able to skim through them and I don't have any questions or edits on them.
Same, I did skim through them and I did not see any questions or edits. It was a while ago and my memory is only getting worse, so. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as they are.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. So roll call vote. Star, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Hey, Lamb, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank
All
you.
righty. So, so Wendy, is there anything else that you wanted to update us on, or what do we need to know?
Yes, well, so we are still short a committee member.
Mhm.
Stephanie, who actually at the last meeting was voted as vice chair, her term expired and she chose not to renew. So we added a new member who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but we added one, but then we lost one, so we're back to needing another member. If anybody knows anybody who would like to serve, I know, the town administrator's office, they put that out there every year, of all the vacancies on the boards and committees. But we're still one short. So if you have any friends that
Spread the
join.
word. Yeah. And do
please
you
spread the word.
know if it's Emily, right? Is that the one that's our newest member?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if she is a CPA or has a background? I know there's a preference to have at least one CPA on the committee. I don't think any of the three of us are. Granted, I think anybody with interest and experience is better than having a vacancy, but it would help to know if she is so that we can,
I can check.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All righty. All right. So I think we can all do our, get the word out to our networks and hopefully generate some interest in that. Okay.
Excellent.
Wendy, from your perspective, anything else?
Just that I know, the town administrator had wanted to have a presentation to the select board regarding our meeting.
Okay. And so as you and I had chatted about, I could be available if 7 o'clock works on Monday. I can make myself available. As mentioned, I have another meeting that runs from 4 to 7. And if theirs runs over, I can let them know ahead of time that I need to step out to make the presentation to the select board.
That would be fantastic because the meetings are in person now for the select board.
Okay.
If you would still be able to do that.
Yeah, I think we'll be I'll just be over at the middles. Yeah, I think we're negotiating. So I'll just be over at the middle school in person so I can just pop on over to there.
Excellent. That would be great. Yeah, I was going to check with Elizabeth too to see, what the agenda was looking like, to see if there was a lot of items, and she could, certainly move you back. I just didn't want
to
to
later would be better.
If
there's
the meeting was going to be over in 45 minutes.
Yeah, Mark, I don't think there's been a select board meeting that short.
Not in like 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so I imagine it'll go at least the hour, and I can I'll be able to join. And Mark, if you and I can maybe try to connect, it would be it'd be great to get your feedback from the select board perspective of what of all of this you think they would be most interested in hearing, so that we can, I've summarized before, I've presented before, but it's always nice, with a new set of folks, if there are any topics you think would be particularly of interest, I can prepare to dive into those a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All righty.
And certainly, Kelly, you're welcome to attend the meeting also.
We don't want to feel left out. It was a riveting Monday night viewing.
Really.
What was that, Mark?
I'll be disappointed if you're not there. No pressure.
Okay. All right.
Wendy, can you tell me what time Jen will be presenting at too? So if it's later, if it ends up being like 7:30 or later.
Yeah, we're going to target probably around 7-ish, maybe a little after. I don't know if your meetings tend to go right to 7 or after.
Yeah, it can. It depends on how long people, caucus or where we are in discussions. So
okay,
could end early. We'll see. Okay. And then I think I think that's it then for today. So I know that we can't publish the minutes from this meeting until we meet again to approve the minutes from
Yeah.
this meeting. So I'm thinking that we don't want to let too long of a time go before we get the minutes published. So Wendy, do you have a sense for what would be a reasonable time frame for Roseanne to be able to do the minutes and for us to just have a quick follow-up meeting to approve
Oh.
those and get them published?
Can she do them by Monday and we just do it at the select board meeting, or?
No, you can't do that.
Oh, there's Roseanne.
You need to have an audit. You need to have an audit committee meeting posted 48 hours in advance for it to be legal. And that couldn't happen. But you could do it in the middle of the day, you know, because if it's via Zoom, it could be in the morning, around lunchtime. Like if it's a short meeting, I can jump in anywhere from my
Yep.
phone, easy peasy.
Me too.
Okay.
I'd give it 2 weeks
Roseanne,
anyway.
do you have a thought on like when you think you could probably get these done? I know this meeting is usually a very lengthy set of minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we want to be reasonable and respectful of your time.
Couple weeks.
Can I? Oh.
And Roseanne, you're on mute if you are able to respond.
Perhaps she has stepped away, in which case I would suggest maybe no less than 2 weeks. Like give her at least a couple weeks.
Yeah. Do we want to maybe
Yeah,
target,
yeah.
if you can check your calendars, do we want to maybe target like a month out?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
seems
I
very
think
nice.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometime maybe early October. Let me see. All right. So which calendar am I in? The school committee calendar. So I have a school committee meeting that Thursday evening. It's mentioned I Mark, same with you. I can generally jump into things during the day. Wendy, if that's easier for you too, rather than taking up your evening,
That
whatever.
works for me.
Okay.
I'd actually prefer it during the day. It will open
Okay.
up. It's a 5-minute meeting. I don't want to do it at night,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So that pulls up the work calendar now. Third calendar. Let's go. How does, I guess, Wendy, what works well for you? Oh, hey, Roseanne.
Hey, I'm here. I'm sorry. I've been listening the whole time. I was having issues with my microphone. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
So I got disconnected for a minute. I heard Mark say like a week or two. So I mostly type them up, as we go. I just like to defer to the recording just to catch anything that I might have missed.
Okay. Yeah, we were thinking maybe the first week in October, we'd give it a month. That way, you're not under a ridiculous time crunch.
No worries. I usually once I can get in to ECAD and I can see it on there, I just kind of skim through it and almost rewatch the meeting again and just make sure I have everything.
Well, there's a good time, huh?
Yeah. So fun.
If I can, I'll start. I'll throw out October
Okay.
6th at 10 a.m.
October 6th, the Thursday.
Thursday, 10 a.m.
Ew. I do have a meeting at 10. I'd be available at 9:30 or 10:30.
9:30 works.
9:30. Okay.
Works for me too.
Okay. All right.
So 9:30. Perfect.
Okay. Great. Right. So Wendy, why don't we just plan to maybe in Roseanne just kind of do a touch base closer to the end of September, see if we're on track, and then you can get the minutes, you can get the agenda posted and the minutes shared out to us so that we can read through them
Perfect.
in advance. Okay. All righty. So 9:30.
Wendy, apologize for, I don't know if you received, I don't even know how many emails. I was having such issues with my Gmail today trying to get you the minutes this morning.
Oh, I think I only got one email from you.
Oh, good. But you know what? Once my Gmail goes back online, you're gonna get like 5 more. I couldn't figure it out. But anyway, I'm glad. Yeah, I saw the posted.
Okay. All righty then. So I think unless anybody has anything else, we can take a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
That's good.
Great. All righty. So, and Star second, a roll call vote. Star, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Kay Lamb, yes.
All right. Meeting is adjourned. All right.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.